Nigerians react to Otupo bank robbery. Benue State government vows to arrest all culprits.
Nigeria Customs Service repels attack on facility in Yobe State.
Court of Appeal sacks Senate Minority Leader Simon Nwagwan, orders rerun.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss the task ahead of the new leadership of the EFCC.
The function of Nigeria's Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, officially began in 2003 as a partial response to pressure from the Financial Action Task Force on money laundering, which had ranked Nigeria as one of the 23 countries that were non-cooperative in the combined efforts to fight money laundering globally. Its pioneer chairman, Nuhu Ribado's work raked in several hitherto untouchable persons involved in money laundering, or 419 as referred to in Nigerian palace, reference taken from offenders who violate section 419 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended.
Well, Jumai, thank you very much. Actually, Section 419 relates to the Criminal Code, not the Constitution of the Federal Republic. But in subsequent years, all segments of society, including governors, political office holders, top business executives, and senior civil servants, have been investigated by the EFCC for alleged financial crimes, including advance fee fraud. Now, recently, some persons have raised concerns that the EFCC has over time become a weapon used to attack political opponents. Now, there have also been accusations that the way monies realized in the fight against corruption have been managed, and what some have described as selective justice, where persons involved in corruption were not arrested, are matters of concern.
Now, some others insist that the Commission has always operated outside the Constitution, that as a creation of the National Assembly, the EFCC does not have the power to interfere with the activities of state governments. They also say the EFCC is performing police functions, among several other accusations.
Well, in June this year, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu suspended Abdul Rashid Bawa as the Commission's chairman and then appointed Abdul Karim Chukol, the then Director of Operations, in an acting capacity. Bawa's suspension anchored on a number of allegations, including abuse of office, which were leveled against him.
Now, Ola Olukayode was appointed and confirmed by the Senate last week at a time of serious reforms in the fight against corruption. Now, it is quite an understatement to say Nigerians are full of expectations from the new EFCC chairman, and he's aware of the high stakes before him.
Well, again, just to note that Bawa's incarceration for alleged offenses for which he's been investigated, then came up with the news that he had resigned his chairmanship, which paved the way for the nomination and subsequent confirmation of Olukoyode, rather. Now, at his interface with the Senate last week, the new EFCC chairman pledged to stay within the rule of law, and they gave assurance that the anti-graft agency was taking several steps back to its mandate of upholding only the law. Now, EFCC's 9th chairman, Olukoyode, is not new at the commission. He served previously as chief of staff to the former acting chairman, and of course, this also generated quite some stir in the media, and he was also the secretary of the EFCC.
But it is clear that the man at the helm of affairs at the Nigeria's Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has a great task ahead of him. Now, this task is our focus today on Good Morning Nigeria. Welcome to the program. I am Jumai Yusuf.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Jumai to also welcome you to the program. Good morning, Nigeria, reaching you live from our headquarters studios in the nation's capital of Abuja. In the course of the program, of course, we'll have usual highlights of the morning news, business news, and later on review of the newspapers. For now, here is Olajide Bello, who has the morning news. Good morning, Olajide.
Good morning, Kingsley and Jumai. Here is the news. The Benue State government has vowed to ensure perpetrators of the Otukpo Bank's robbery and the collaborators are apprehended and brought to book. The Deputy Governor, Sam Odeme, Vishnu, when he visited the Ochidoma in his palace in Otukpo to commiserate with him and the entire people over the incident.
We are going to sit down as a community to work together with governments so that together we can design a new security architecture to respond to this level of criminality. We are not going to allow this to be swept under the carpet. Those who have perpetrated this heinous act will be brought to account.
Nigeria Customs Service says its men with a timely reinforcement from the Nigerian army repelled attack on its facility in Gaydam, Yobe State by a suspected Boko Haram terrorist. A statement by the Public Relations Officer of Customs, Abdullahi Wada, says the service lost an officer in the encounter. The statement states further that Comptroller General Adewale Adeniyi appreciates cooperation from sister security agencies and commiserate with the family of the fallen officers, saying the service remains resolute in ensuring adequate security at the country's borders. Operatives of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, have arrested a 40-year-old Madrid, Spain-based businessman, Sheriff Egbo, at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, while attempting to board an Air France flight to Paris, France, after they discovered he ingested illicit drugs. Egbo was arrested on Saturday, 14th October, after body scanner revealed he had wraps of illicit drugs in his stomach. He was subsequently placed under observation at the agency's exhibit recovery room, where he excreted 93 pellets of heroin weighing 2.22 kilograms. In the same vein, NDLEA operatives across Lagos, Imo, Edo, Ekiti, and Kano conducted raids that saw them confiscate 500,000 pills and 600 grams of tramadol, 14.410.3 kg of skunk, 1 kilogram of methamphetamine, 2.5 kilograms cocaine and phenacetin, also 112 grams of dimethyl-sulfone and 583 grams of cocaine and phenacetin, 1,610 kilograms of cannabis, which were all seized before shipment. Commending the arrests and seizures of the past week by officers and men of the MMIA, Imo, Ondo, Kano, Edo Zone J commands, as well as those of Dogi, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of NDLEA, Brigadier General Mohammed Buba Marwa, charged them and their compatriots across all formations of the agency to continue to remain vigilant and double their efforts, especially with the aspiration of criminal networks to make money by all means towards the end of the year season. The Court of Appeal in Abuja has nullified the election of the Senate Minority Leader Simon Wang in the February 25th senatorial election in Plateau North Senatorial District. The court gave the verdict in the appeals filed by Chris Giwa of the All Progressives Congress and Jiang Zi of the Labour Party. The three-man panel of justices in its verdict, read by Justice Frida William Daudu, also ordered the Independent National Electoral Commission to conduct a fresh election in the senatorial district within 90 days. Giwanzi had appealed the judgment of the National Assembly Election Petition Tribunal in Jos Plateau State, which affirmed Wang of the People's Democratic Party as the winner of the senatorial poll. The appellants contended what Wang was not qualified to stand for an election, as his party, the PDP, which nominated him during the election, had no structure to do so, having not complied with an earlier High Court order for the party to conduct a proper state congress. Justice Daudu, who read the lead judgment of the appellate court, held that the High Court order was not fully complied with by the PDP, as 12 local governments did not participate in the said congress. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has reaffirmed his commitment to enhancing STEM education and promoting innovation and technological advancement as drivers of economic growth in his renewed hope agenda. This message was conveyed by the President during the 6th and 7th convocation ceremony of the Federal University, Lokoja.
Let me say education is one of the priorities of the 8-point agenda of Mr. President, Renew Hope. So education is renew hope. Education, renew hope. Renew hope is education, and we'll get there. So this is one of the university, the best university, federal university we can see.
Issue to be good ambassadors of Federal University Lokoja and ensure that you strive to uphold the morals and values of this noble university.
And that concludes the morning news. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Jumai and Kingsley after the break.
I promise that I shall remain committed and serve faithfully. I also invite all to join this enterprise to make our beloved nation into its better self. We can do it. We must do it. We shall do it.
Broadcasting Commission (NBC) welcomes broadcasters, content creators, tech experts, exhibitors, and investors from Nigeria and all over to the 13th edition of Africast. Africast is the destination event where local and global industry players experience the latest innovative technologies, services, products, and markets. Participants will experience 3 days of world-class exposition showcasing the very best in creativity, innovation, and technological advancement in the broadcast industry. Theme: broadcast content, synergy, finance, and market. Date: Tuesday 24th to Thursday 26th October 2023. Venue: Marriott Hotel, Ikeja, Lagos. Time: 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily. Chief host: Honorable Minister of Information and National Orientation, Alhaji Muhammad Idris. Host: Director General, National Broadcasting Commission (NBC). Announcer: Management. NBC, your right to quality broadcasting.
We are Inter-Party Advisory Council, IPAC. We are political parties. We are the pathway to political power. IPAC, in line with its core mandate, is carrying out a peer review mechanism for elected political office holders. Performance of the President of Nigeria, state governors, state and National Assembly members will be assessed comparatively. This will trigger healthy competition amongst our elected politicians to deliver dividends of democracy like good roads, good healthcare delivery system, good schools, full employment, security, and so on. This prestigious program will soon be shown live on television stations across Nigeria. IPAC, deepening and consolidating democracy.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, how might the price of premium motor spirit, otherwise known as petrol, be reduced under the present circumstances? Let's listen to our correspondent, Tokbe Alabi.
Nigeria's palm oil imports from Malaysia, a leading global producer, increased by 65.3% in the first 9 months of 2023. Data obtained from the Malaysian Palm Oil Council revealed that the country's palm oil imports from Malaysia increased to 234,324 metric tons between January and September 2023. From 141,786 metric tons in the corresponding period of 2022, indicating an increase of 92,538 metric tons. Nigeria, along India, China, Kenya, Netherlands, Japan, and Turkey are listed as its top 10 major importers. To boost local crude palm oil production, the federal government imposed a 35% tariff, 10% duty, and 25% levy on palm oil imports into Nigeria as measures to protect the country's palm oil industry and spur industry growth. Experts seek increased investment to halt oil palm importation as improved palm oil exploration will boost the country's gross domestic product (GDP). Nigeria's palm oil output was estimated at 900,000 to 1.3 million metric tons at over 500 billion annually. With a national demand of 2.1 million metric tons, the supply gap was around 800,000 metric tons. In the meantime, the Director General of Nigeria Employers Consultative Association (NECA), Adewale Oyorinde, says following the 35,000 naira wage raise for federal workers, the private sector has taken a decisive step in implementing a comprehensive financial reward program, both in the form of cash and in-kind allowances. While appreciating the temporary removal of the 7.5% value-added tax (VAT) on diesel, the association says no matter what wage award is granted, addressing the sustainability of businesses, the rising cost of goods and services will offset any benefits for employees, calling on government to accompany relief measures with efforts that can enhance enterprise sustainability. With business news, I am Tokbe Alabi.
Many thanks, Tope, for the business news. Next on the program is Newspaper Review.
Our newspaper reviewer, Chukwudi Okolie-Ogbaja, is here with us on the studios. Chukwudi, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Kingsley. How was the weekend for you?
I was quiet. And yours?
Fine.
Nice weekend, rainy weekend.
Perpetually looking resplendent. You are in the mood to launch this segment. I am here to play along. How are you today?
I'm fine. Let's quickly begin with the Vanguard newspaper. And above the masthead, inflation, contractors cite naira value, poor funding for refusal to return to site. Find details on page 8. Plateau, appeal court sacks Senate minority leader Mwand Kwan. Details on page 34. Reports of attempt on my life false. That's coming from Kogi State Governor Yahaya Bello. Killings, Benue CP bans protest, tightens security. Eulogy to an epitome of integrity, Mr. Akintola Williams. Osunke, that's on page 23. And the headlines in the Vanguard newspaper: presidential tussle, anxiety as Tinubu, Atiku, Obi, APM resume battle at Supreme Court. With riders, Apex Court begins hearing today. We have confidence in Supreme Court. That's coming from the PDP. Atiku Obi engaging in another round of propaganda on Nanuga. Pandef, MBF, Slam Gumi, others over campaign of calumny against Wiki. We find the details on page 12. 57.6 billion for 360 SUVs. Serap drags reps to court. High cost of borrowing, FG targets domestic market to fund 9.05 trillion budget deficit. That's on page 19. Let me quickly go to the Blueprint newspaper. And below the masthead, Serap to court stop lawmakers from taking delivery of 57.6 billion 360 SUVs. Troop neutralized 37 terrorists, arrest 95. Details on page 21. Dangote Industries subsidiaries set for Sustainability Week. Find that on page 24. Enugu Nasarawa election petitions presented similar facts, different judgments. That's coming from the Labour Party. Israelis' envoys visit to Wike. That's in the headlines. Northern elders disown Gumi, says views not ours. With riders, Pandef, MBF caution cleric not to undermine nation's diversities. I don't determine relations between countries. That's coming from the Minister of the FCT, Wiki. Presidency to arrest the drift. Nabena. Details on page 14. 2 dead, others injured in Niger boat mishap. You find details on page 13. APC US chapter raises alarm over fake Nadego plan to discredit Tinubu. You find all the details on page 18. November 11 poll, Kogi Governor Bello escapes an assassination attempt which he has debunked. Actually, alleges element in the political space wants to cause mayhem. That's on page 6, Kesley.
All right, we also have the leadership newspaper, and we go straight below the name flag of the leadership newspaper. And one of the trending stories there says 76 suspects paraded over same-sex birthday in Gombe. And despite subsidy removal, oil revenue drops by 1.01 trillion naira in July. Anxiety as Supreme Court rules on Article's motion today. And Israel issues fresh Gaza evacuation warning. There is no assassination attempt on me, says Governor Bello. 5 burnt in fuel tanker accident in Kwara. Enrollment drops in Unity schools over high fees. Details on page 13. And the lead story says 3 months after, that's the kicker, student loan scheme yet to take off. You have the details on page 4, but some of the highlights there on the infographics on the front page says federal government taking another look at the law as September-October deadline expires. No sign of Nigerian Education Bank. Application portal still not open. That's according to students. Under the scheme, eligible applicants will receive up to 500,000 naira or $650 per academic session. Chukudi.
Thank you, Kingsley. Report of attempt on my life falls. That's coming from Yaya Bello. And you begin to wonder, was it later discovered that the reported shooting was from thugs in a planned Nollywood movie who needed a governor's convoy to interpret their lines? I'm asking this because the Commissioner for Information in Kogi State, Kingsley Fowl, had been reported to have earlier said on Sunday that some gunmen in military uniform made an assassination attempt on the governor who was traveling to Abuja from Lokoja. Fowl had said the incident happened around 4 p.m. on Sunday, a few kilometers away from Abuja. Now, when contacted, the Kogi State Commissioner of Police, Haruna Garba, told them that should be the correspondent of the Punch, that they're investigating the matter. What do we believe is the point? But for me, the ultimate is this: Kogi again.
Again.
You know, Kogi again.
Assassination attempt again.
Kogi again. The very dastardly one concerning the lady, the PDP, was it minority leader or something? Woman leader. Yes. Way back, I think that was 2019 or so.
Yes,
I mean, for crying out loud. That was horrid. Kogi again. We don't know what the truth is concerning this, but please, Kogi people deserve peace during elections. I'm not going to take it beyond that so that we don't begin to editorialize, you know. There's another rather absurd one, very, very absurd, because it sounds stranger than fiction. Kingsley, was it the Drum Magazine or Trust or Weekend, Lagos Weekend, that we had Stranger Than Fiction as one of, you remember?
Yeah, you know, there was a column like that, but yes. The one I will remember immediately was in one of the publications by, I think Lagos Weekend has Stranger Than Fiction.
I think it was Lagos Weekend.
But there was a publication by the Punch,
yes.
The Punch Group. The column was, "Could this be true?"
Could this be true? Then on Delta Television,
what was the name of that magazine again? I remember shortly.
Delta Television, then we based a program on that and called it "It Couldn't Be Happening."
It couldn't be happening.
You know,
could this be true?
That's it. You know, Kaduna Seals School over student flogged to death.
Yes, I read that.
It is
principal and the vice principal.
I hope somebody who was not exactly, what did we call it in secondary, compos mentis, yes. You know, concerning their mental makeup, was not cooking up the story. The Kaduna State Schools Quality Assurance Authority, that's KSSQAA, has sealed Al-Azhar Academy in Zaria following the alleged flogging of a JSS 3 student, Marwan Sambo, to death.
A child.
The brutalizing did not happen just from the, allegedly from the principal and the vice, who are now in police detention.
Yes.
The boy was submitted to the seniors in the school where the harrowing experience was said to have continued. That's why I asked Kingsley, where we saw Stranger Than Fiction in those days when journalism was journalism on these shows, you know. It is really unfortunate. You know,
unfortunate.
The fact-finding team was said to have moved to Hajar Gambo Sahaba General Hospital, Zaria, where the victim was formally confirmed dead. So the mad boy is dead. That's
it.
A given. It's known. How the tale that happened could have happened, how the series of things we heard could have happened, is what I still regard as stranger than fiction. Well, the good thing is that the police are investigating.
Yes,
we're going to find out what really
arrest.
happened to this boy.
During that time, there was a discipline master.
Yes.
Do they no longer exist in schools? Well, that was his job. It's not even beating his job to caution you. I can imagine the kind of beating this boy took for him to have lost his life.
Jumai, we are talking about an incident at KSS QAA, Zaria. But the truth is that there's mounting impunity across the land, whatever the institution is. And that tells you that our morals are dropping. Yeah. For crying out loud, hitting another human being should touch something in your heart and make you feel, no, this is not the guilt I'm talking to. When I hear that some people beat their wives, for instance, I ask, how do they manage it? What kind of thinking is behind such a thing?
Like you said earlier.
Yes.
And when some wives beat their husbands.
How many times do wives beat husbands?
I don't know.
Out of a million, maybe one.
I'm just saying, I'm not trying to make light of this very serious issue.
No, I'm not making light of it, but it's very rare to hear that a woman has beaten her husband.
That was an obiter.
Yes.
The issue of the school pupil who was beaten to death raises again two major concerns. One, we recall that at Dowen College, Lekki Phase 1 in Lagos, Sylvester Moroni died as a result of all kinds of fuzzy circumstances that even investigation, autopsy, and justice for the family up to today continues to linger. I read a few weeks ago the parents crying and saying, look, what happened to our son? Who did it? And what is the justice for that incident? Sylvester at Dowen College, a highbrow part of Lagos, Lekki Phase 1. Then you also remember a couple of years ago, the proprietor of a school in Kano lured and murdered a girl, I think Hanatu or so, somewhere in the Hotoro area of Kano. Happily, the school proprietor was arrested. He was charged to court. He was tried, and then convicted and sentenced to death by hanging. Up to now, I have not heard any story whether he went on appeal or whether the governor, Ganduje was then the governor of the state, whether following the exhaustion of the right of appeal, assuming you didn't appeal within the time delimited by the law, whether the governor signed the certificate for him to go to the gallows. Nobody has had any reason. Well, I'm not saying nobody. I haven't had any follow-up about what happened in that particular incident. So there are two instances, and we are still awaiting justice for the families and also justice for the state.
What about in Abuja, the girl that was raped?
The one school
in Abuja, and left a
sorry,
conduct.
what's the name of this? I'm trying to remember the name of the school now. But it's in Lugbe area. It was a notorious case, and people will assume that, no, don't worry, dust will gather on top of this and people will forget about it. People should remember this things, and that is the way society maintains its health.
Exactly.
To say where there's wrongdoing, sanction those who are concerned. You don't beat a child to death. For what purpose?
That is how society maintains its health.
It's horrific.
You know where I try to wish away the Sylvester incident. I don't know whether that's cowardly on my part, because the helplessness that boy felt, misery, he felt alone when we should have all have come to his aid. It's unfortunate. There's a case of a female soldier that is reportedly losing her mind because she wouldn't be discharged. You know, we regard army things as restricted. We hardly talk about them from the CV angle. But I think that if this is the 9-year-old female soldier, Lance Corporal Philomena Namoko, truly wants to leave the army and she has satisfied all the conditions for leaving, she should be allowed to leave. But the spokesman of the 81 Division Nigerian Army, Major Olania Ochoba, has asked that the female soldier be told to call him so that he would like to hear from her, which I think is a way of resolving the matter. I'm thinking a soldier that does not want to be in the force anymore, if you keep her or him, isn't he or she going to become a loose cannon in a sensitive theater of operation?
But there are rules governing this.
Exactly. That's what. It was pointed out in there.
I think that should be. But just so that we don't run out of time, I want to come back to the education sector. Chukwudi, one of the most interesting stories I read at the weekend came out of the convocation ceremonies at the University of Ilorin, where the Vice Chancellor announced that the University of Ilorin had registered 36 patents. Registered 36 patents, even though the reports kept saying, some of the reports I was already there were saying, University of Ilorin produced, you don't produce a patent. You register a patent. In the fields of IT, medicine, agriculture, and others. And these are the kind of stories that we ought to be hearing from convocation ceremonies. You can have 1 million first-class honor, you have 1,000, 200,000 PhDs, and so on and so forth.
What do you have to show for it?
What problems of society are you solving?
That's it.
And Umar Bindri, the former secretary to Adamawa State government, and also former DG of NOTAP, always stresses this thing, that when you see your convocation booklet, well, you have the list of graduates and so on and so forth, you will have it in there, but some of the highlights ought to be the kind of story that we heard from Uni Ilorin at the weekend. 36 patents
registered.
That your university, following research, that is what they have registered.
That's a good one.
So I think it's a good one, and it's a way to follow. Other things we would like to hear, this is how much you have attracted from the private sector, from industry as endowments to fund research. Not every time federal government come and give us money, federal government come and give us. A university doesn't function that way. So kudos to the University of Ilorin. There could be others, who are doing the same thing, but we want to hear more of such stories. We want to hear more of societal problems being resolved. So that these are the kind of things we want to hear, not this whole idea of academic publishing, they say publish or perish. You have been publishing and you have all kinds of titles and we don't have any meaning to us.
That defines an institution with a living R&D department, research and development. Juma?
Yes, exactly. I was reading up on the Otuko attack in Benue State and the audacity of these robbers to perpetrate such a crime in broad daylight was just out of this world. It was like a movie, actually. I was watching a movie, and there have been conflicting stories from the police, from the social media, saying they've been arrested, and the police are saying they are still battling them in the forest, that they've not made arrests, who have been killed. But I don't understand what is going on here with our security forces.
Let us look for them.
Yes.
Ray Michael Nwachukwu of blessed memory, Radio Rivers jingle. I'm a robber, not a thief. Now, a person like you and me, they bad, they drink yafu. Help us find them when they commit crime.
Yes. So they're in the forest.
Let us look for them. They are somewhere that we know them.
Yes.
Fish them out.
Yes.
They're not ghosts.
They are not ghosts.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that there were fatalities arising from that robbery incident. A number of policemen lost their lives. A number of policemen lost their lives in that incident. A number of customers who were in the banking hall also lost their lives, according to the reports. So it's to be a manhunt. And I remember raising this when we were having a conversation on security accountability with some of our regular guests. These are very knowledgeable persons about security, General John Temlong, Kabir Adamu, and others. And I said, when an incident happens, do the security agencies adopt a silo mentality? Let's say this has happened now to the police. So do all other security agencies say it's a business of the police? Or if, let us assume there's an attack on the civil defense of personnel, you say no, it's the civil defense personnel. Or do you take a whole of security architecture approach so that the assets that you have, you deploy against these criminal elements, and within a short time you pick these guys up? Because if you were to say, oh no, it's the business, it's the police that were involved, well, they will slither through the net and nobody will get there.
They have mutual interest in the matter.
Absolutely, yes. And then this also reminds me, some years ago, you remember there was a similar robbery incident in Kwara State.
Yes.
Offa. It was captured, incidentally, it was captured on CCTV. The videos went viral. The still pictures also went viral. They went to court. One of them was a former policeman, was dismissed earlier. One of them died at Duku or so. That after a while, as typical of us, you won't hear anything about those stories again. No. Unless the suspects or the defendants traveled. After that, then they are beyond justice. If they are still in court, let us know what has happened. I think that these are the kind of stories that some of them refer to as cold case files. These are very recent, so not too cold yet.
It's journalists I blame mostly for this. What? Stay on the story. Don't just break it and go to sleep.
Follow up on it. I wonder why banks don't have CCTV cameras. They should have been able to capture this as it happened.
They might.
Yes.
They might. I'm sure
they will oblige.
There was a robbery incident as well, coordinated robbery incident somewhere in Do Central. I think that was been Uromi or Ubiaja.
Yes.
A couple. And there were persons who were courageous enough
to help apprehend them.
That was late after the fact, but they were recording them. You could see they went with dynamite to the banking premises and so on and so on. They were recording them, and unfortunately, some of those persons were not.
Dynamites indeed. That reminds me of this Seluku UBA robbery. That was dastardly. My town was thrown into pandemonium over that incident.
Well, Chukudi, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you as always.
Always a pleasure on this side as well.
We'll take a break. When we return, our conversation will begin. Don't go away.
You have to move from the point where you protect and defend your religion to a point where you also recognize the rights of the other person, of the other religion, and protect it. So if I am protecting my own territory and my own people and trying to emphasize their rights and protect their rights, I should also be thinking about how to protect the rights of the others.
Both Islam and Christianity recognize and defer to God, and both recognize the temporariness of the life of this world, and that ultimately we all go back to God for the day of reckoning, when everybody will render an account of his life on this temporary abode.
It's Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, before we commence our conversation, which is on the task before the new leadership of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, let's take this background by our correspondent, Oyemi Ajayi.
Championing Nigeria's anti-corruption campaign is a very tough task which elicits more enmity aside the threats and risk in the course of duty. Many see the creation of the Office of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, as a legal weapon used to attack political opponents. Now, one major task ahead the new chairman is the daunting task of rebranding the agency to prove it is quite independent in its responsibilities, even when it's appointed by the president. Experts insist that the new boss of the agency needs to prove his integrity and passion for his country to serve diligently and not easy to influence. There are reports and accusations against previous heads of the organization who are perceived to have through the office enriched themselves. Security experts also say the EFCC needs to transition to making use of technology to aid the arrest of more high-profile individuals, particularly those with political influence who loot the nation's resources. At the forefront of his responsibility is the combating of corruption effectively, which would significantly contribute to realizing Nigeria's vast potentials. This means EFCC must not just fight corruption, but must be prepared when it fights back. Some have also said most monies realized in the fight must meticulously be accounted for, letting people know how they are being spent, aside the fact that proper investigation must be done when handling cases. Now, how prepared is the new EFCC boss for the task ahead? Will there be any sacred cows? Also, who will be the first scapegoat of his leadership? What new ideas is the new sheriff injecting into the fight against corruption? Our guest in the studio will be speaking on these issues shortly.
Thank you, Oyeyemi Ajayi, and already seated with us in the studio to discuss the task ahead of new leadership of the EFCC is Ahmed Sajo, former Commissioner for Information and Strategy, Adamawa State, Adamawa State and Public Affairs Analyst. Is a regular on Good Morning Nigeria. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much.
And also here in our Abuja studio is Mazi Afam Osigwe, SAN, former NBA Secretary General. Is a regular also on the program. Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it has.
Yes.
All right, and joining us from our network studios in Benin is the Reverend David Ugolo, Executive Director at NEJ. Of course, that stands for, among other things, Economic Justice, Environmental and Economic Justice. The Reverend Ugolo, we're glad to have you on Good Morning Nigeria. All right, gentlemen, you're all regulars on Good Morning Nigeria, and we appreciate your being with us on the program today. But let's begin. I'm sure that in part of your opening comments, you most likely say that a tree doesn't necessarily make a forest. The AFCC is an institution, as it were now. It has a management team, and it has personnel, and it's also governed by law. So the fact that you have a new helmsman and a new secretary doesn't necessarily mean that both the secretary and the chair will perform all the functions of the EFCC. But let's take some step back and ask ourselves, look, EFCC has been in operation now for 20 years. And is it necessarily the case that we have moved the needle from where we were in the fight against corruption before the advent of the EFCC versus where we are today, so that we know what lies ahead of us? Ahmed Sajo, let's begin with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there is one thing I have always observed in this country, and that makes even our understanding of what we really want as a people very difficult. When the name of the new chairman was mentioned, all the argument in the public space was whether he was qualified or he was not qualified. You are talking about a tree does not make a forest, but I am telling you that, every change in the world, positive or negative, is determined by one thing: leadership. Leadership defines the direction. So even if it's an institution with institutional framework, with management team, with operatives, it's the leadership that will determine the direction. It's like the driver, it's like the pilot, decides where they go to. Now, what we should have done ab initio, as soon as the name of the current chairman was mentioned, we first dig out. He was a chief of staff in that same EFCC. He was a secretary in that EFCC. What are his antecedents there? What were his contributions? How did he handle the previous assignments, as chief of staff and as secretary? Unless we begin to ask ourselves about people's pedigree when they're given appointments, we will miss the point. In this very country, I am aware that there was a time, people who were supposed to be co-professionals were given assignments in their professions and they failed. And there were people who were just committed, who may not be co-professionals but committed and have succeeded. So what is the level of commitment of the new chairman? For a very long time, we have had situations where the EFCC chairman will leave that office under very controversial circumstances, sometimes hounded by the very authorities that appointed them, either the same set of people or a different set of people, but with the same power and authority. Why is it so? Why have we ever interrogated why it happens like this? Why is it that no EFCC chairman so far had left that office without any controversy around that person? What are the truth about some of the things we are told had happened and the lies about some of those things that we're told has happened? For me personally, I believe that in most cases, when we set up a chairman for the EFCC and he wants to go after certain individuals, and those individuals, I tell you, no matter what you do, a beneficiary of a system sees anyone that wants to dismantle that system as an enemy. And this corruption has benefited so many people. This system has benefited so many people. And the FCC had been able to tackle part of it. But part of it, it's become difficult because there are people who have acquired, authority in this country on the strength of their past activities, which we may not, clearly say was transparent. So how do we navigate all of these things? I believe that, being the very first EFCC chairman from the southern part of this country, we are hoping that this may be a different era. We are hoping that this may be somebody who will at least drive the EFCC into a direction that ensures that there is equity in its management of its affairs. It's not like, the basic thing in this country for all of us is that we have thrown equity, justice, and fairness overboard. And so long as you don't have those values as your core national values, there's no magic anybody you can put anywhere can do. And that is my own position.
Your opening statement there. Let's hear from you too.
I do not know which specific question you wish me to address, but if the question is whether EFCC has largely achieved its objectives, I would say that...
what Kingsley is saying is 1-3 cannot,
It's about what you making
yes,
it.
Yes.
I think that was Kingsley. That was Kingsley trying to predict what we are going to say.
Two questions as a preface.
It wasn't a question, it was a preface.
Yes.
The substance, and I'm sure the learned senior advocate got it, the gravamen of my question is, look, 20 years on since the EFCC began its operations, and for us to therefore properly situate what the new management is taking over and what should be their task. Has the needle moved in the fight against corruption?
Mr. Kingsley, I don't think we need to tell them what their task should be. The law has clearly set out what the EFCC is meant to do. The question is, has it been able to achieve this? The question is, has the leadership, successive leaderships, been allowed to achieve this? Are there other factors that have made it difficult for the EFCC to be that which it was set up to be? And the answer in some cases would be no, and somewhere in between. So EFCC is not a failure in the fight against financial and economic crimes. But EFCC has not engendered confidence in the public that in this fight, it has done so fairly and with a view to sanitizing society and deterring other persons from committing crimes. And that is why we have the perception that in the fight against financial and economic crimes, EFCC is sometimes selective. And it is not helped by the fact that sometimes EFCC makes so much noise about the volume of money that has been stolen, the high-profile nature of the crimes it is investigating, the individuals involved, and then a few years down the line, most of these persons are never even called in for questioning or ever charged to court. And it's not also held by the fact that the EFCC reminds me of that statement is that about all sound and fury. And the substance is not there. Now, I will not pretend not to know that in Nigeria there seems to be the thinking that crime pays. So you see persons who have been investigated, been appointed into positions of authority and trust, and they are cleared either by Houses of Assembly or National Assembly, and these ongoing investigations or even trials mean nothing. So we unwittingly give the impression that just get the power and all these things will go away. And then the interference, the constant change in the leadership of EFCC in circumstances that try to blight the reputation of the occupiers of this office, and then nothing ever gets done to them. There's no security of tenure. You would expect that the leadership of such a body cannot be removed without an address to the National Assembly supported by some type of vote. And so it appears, look, if we don't like your face, we go, you're part of the other administration, you have to kick you out, or you investigated us at some point, then we can't trust you to do this work. And so the normal Nigerian factor, corruption, either by the society or by the operatives themselves, have also crept in. And as we go down the line, the people don't see much difference between the EFCC and the police. And it is supposed to be a specialized agency that the members are well remunerated or better remunerated than the police, and they're supposed to have higher operational guidelines and access to scientific and other modern ways of investigating crime. But what do we get? EFCC, like the Nigerian police, will pronounce you guilty even before commencing investigation. And you would expect that the investigation will be carried out discreetly, a file built on you. By the time you're being called in, it's just to take your statement and you're charged to court. But then they make so much and arrest you and are interested in how long they keep you in custody. Not about doing proper investigation. And so, as the new helmsman comes in, I wish he would dispassionately look at things with the eyes of an outsider. He has been there before, he's coming back now as chairman, executive chairman. He should ask himself, what are the challenges we face? What are the problems? What are the criticisms? And he should be able to objectively advise himself if we are to make progress. The emphasis should not be on detention. I mean, when I keep saying EFCC seems to derive much pleasure in keeping people, you have even situations where EFCC would have granted you bail, they charge you to court, the same EFCC starts opposing your bail in court, and you came from your house. Or you have been reporting, they inform you they have charged you to court, and they put you in custody. A few days you're being arraigned in court. So it's all about as if, how you know we are powerful is that we can deprive you of your freedom. And we should also look at, if people can deploy so much wealth to frustrate trials or prolong trials, shouldn't the EFCC also find some other ways of recovering the stolen money, if that be the case, like using plea bargain, non-prosecution agreement, non-conviction based asset forfeiture. But sometimes they use them, they freeze the money in your account, they leave them there to go to waste for so many years just to punish you. So we should look at the modus operandi of the EFCC and ask ourselves, have the dreams in setting up the EFCC been realized 20 years after? And I would say, while the realization of the dream has not been a complete failure, it has not been a success story. And I would like to stop so that other persons can also make their interventions.
Indeed, you've raised some pertinent questions. And let's go now to Reverend David Ugolo, Executive Director, ANICH. He's in Benin. You've listened to the opening comments from our guest, and there's this belief that leading the country's anti-corruption agency is often seen as a perilous undertaken by all, and we now have a new EFCC chairman. 20 years of EFCC functioning in Nigeria, but still there are some underlying problems that have existed in the agency that has made most of these chairmen of the EFCC go down, you know, bow. They don't bow out, they go down under corruption charges itself, corruption, fighting corruption. Let's get your views on this new tax that is on the table for the new chairman. He's part of the system. He has been working with the EFCC for quite some time. He has some achievements there. Let's have your views on the tax ahead of him and how he intends to move the new EFCC, as he said, to the next level.
For this question, just to say that some of the issues raised by my co-panelists are germane, particularly the one the son raised about issue of lack of security for the chairman is a really great challenge for making EFCC function in accordance to the act that set it up. But beyond that, we also need to understand the political economic context. It's very important. In tackling corruption, you cannot take the context away. And if you look at the environment today, there is no way EFCC will be able to deliver without taking the environment into consideration. And that's the power. You need to look at the political economy around. You need to because at the end of the day, the political party that is in power will define how EFCC will be successful. And so, and if you look the past, you will see that major challenge that is facing EFCC not able to implement anti-corruption crusade as the way they would have expected is as a result of interference. And interference in the activities of EFCC comes from the above. So in that context, I like to say that the success of every EFCC chairman or EFCC as an institution is a function of what the president of the country wants. So having said that, and I've also listened to the EFCC chairman, who has not just been confirmed, he has clearly come up with his philosophy in terms of what will be his priority. And among those priorities, I said he's going to focus on the EFCC mandate. He's going to also focus in tackling corruption, both the people in the ruling party and also the opposition party. Then he also talk about the issue of transparency and accountability in how he carries out this function. And then he also talk about the issue of proper criminal justice reform. You don't allow cases to spend a long time. And this is not within the power of EFCC. When anti-corruption cases are in court, EFCC don't necessarily have to now determine when the cases is completed. So when you look all this in total, you see that we all have responsibility, and that's where I completely agree with the new EFCC chairman, Olukayode. He said very clearly that we all have responsibility to work together, and that's collective action. The Nigerian population, the citizens, also have responsibility. But if you look at the anti-corruption problem, the key thing is procurement corruption. And if you look those who are involved in procurement corruption, is less than 1% of the population of the country. And this 1% are the most influential politicians, elite in the country. And they have the power, they control the political party, they control the court, they are able to use their resources to secure long-term extension of cases and delay the cases and blackmail the personnel of EFCC, and at the end of the day, the case go closely. So my take is that we should not expect EFCC to succeed when the political environment is not clean up. And that's why I completely agree with his son. You know, if we want to make corruption must not pay, we don't necessarily have to put people in jail. As a former member of the Interministerial Committee on Asset Recovery, I've come to realize that fighting corruption should not be just putting people in jail. It can become a source of revenue for the country. And how do you make fighting corruption as a source of revenue for the country? Use all methods. They play bargain. People coming up to own up. Once somebody found that, you can give a benefit of that people come up to say that I have committed this crime and I want to own up. So EFCC do not necessarily have to go to court. A decision can be reached and the money is returned back to the state. Because this long-term trying to take people to court, and at the end, the people use all kind of legal process to delay the process, increases debt and lack of trust for the process. Because this 1% I mentioned earlier on, they are so influential. They control the political situation. They control the political environment. They control the political party. Their wife and children are the judges in the court. EFCC is not the judge. So our expectation from EFCC should be the function of what kind of system do we have in the country. Until we deal with those challenges, it becomes increasingly difficult for us to expect a perfect result. In that sense, one man cannot form a forest, cannot do the challenge of tackling corruption in Nigeria. We need a collective action. And it has to start from how we prosecute corruption cases in our courts. Thank you.
The Reverend David Ugolo, thank you very much there for your intervention. Now let's come back to the studios. And let me also remind our guests and our viewers of one of the propensities of the Nigerian elite class. We often like to parrot some of these stock phrases. Often you say international best practices, that for us to succeed and thrive, we need strong institutions and not strong men. And I'm sure we hear that often.
Yes, yes.
And those who shout the most about strong institutions are sometimes, according to what the Reverend Ugolo is saying, they are amongst those who will do their best, if some would say their worst, to undermine the very sinews that will make institutions strong. How does this apply to the EFCC?
You know, I said it earlier, that beneficiaries of a system do not see anything wrong in it, no matter what you do to them. You know, some of the key beneficiaries of this corruption are the 1% or so he's talking about, the political elite and, of course, the civil service elite. We're talking about procurement, crimes, and things. But let's put certain things in perspective. First and foremost, there are issues that have been raised by both the Reverend and the learned Silk, that the legal ecosystem is key. If you do not, reform the legal ecosystem to reduce the time frame within which cases lie in the courts, if you do not, reform the system whereby investigations and trials are done in a manner that is not only transparent, but in a manner that does not play to the gallery as we do today in Nigeria, we would have that. Then secondly, there is this our hegemonic nature. Anybody that has a position in this country wants to exercise power. And that's what the learned Silk is saying. You arrest somebody, you deprive him of his freedom, you show you are powerful, you freeze his account. But in the real sense of it, what do you do to achieve the results you want? At the end of the day, the whole matter fizzles out. And it's also a little bit scandalous that, you hear of humongous theft committed by people. There is a huge media trial, which in itself is wrong. You go to public space and announce all manner of things, and then that same person that you have said has done this and this and this and this, in the public space is given an appointment that needs to be cleared by a legislative body. And then the guy is cleared, and you just see, that he wants to contest for an election with all the burden of the accusations on his head. He is cleared by the electoral body, he runs for an election, wins the election, and then turns around and determines what happens to the person that is working in the anti-corruption agency. So you look at all of these things. If we do not look at, correct it all at once, we're just, pursuing shadows and leaving the substance. The EFCC itself must be so diligent in its investigation and prosecution that by the time somebody is announced as an accused, investigations have been taken discreetly, facts have been assembled, the next day the person goes to court. So we avoid this media trial before a person is taken to court, public space trial before a person is taken to court. As soon as they say, look, so and so person had taken this much amount of money, wrongfully. We have investigated, we have the facts, the next day he's going to court. So let the reportage of what happens be from the evidence that is placed in the court of, in the court of law, not in the public space by whoever says whatever they want to say. And once we are able to arrive at that station, we may be able to begin to tackle corruption more appropriately. But I still believe that leadership is key. We have a new leadership in the EFCC. Of course, the government should do well to assist us in developing confidence, because the confidence gap is very wide, not only in the EFCC but in most government organizations. We have to be very honest about that. We have to develop a lot more confidence in the EFCC, but the EFCC itself. Let me ask a question. Here, how many people are even aware of what is the mandate of the EFCC, beyond what we read in the newspapers, beyond what we hear on radio and television, beyond some of the fake news that go out on social media? What is the mandate? What is the EFCC doing about engaging the public appropriately to understand this is their mandate, so that we can follow? You cannot tell me you're going to be transparent, you're going to be accountable, unless I know what you're going to be transparent about, what you're going to be accountable about. How are you going to do it? How much do we know of what the mandate of the EFCC is? Even when
they come for you, you will know what the mandate is.
Well, exactly. And I want to tell you that, sometimes in this country, where we get it wrong is that we categorize crimes. When issues that concern billions of naira are taken to EFCC, you may just read it in the newspapers and actions will be taken for some time before it fizzles out. But there are little crimes that should have been addressed very urgently, so that we do not make crime itself, we do not glorify crime itself. But somehow we do. I know of a petition that was written to AFCC with all the facts, the bank accounts of the fraudsters and everything. It's more than 2 years now. Nothing has been done about it. And so we need to address both high-profile crimes and low-profile crimes, because it is from the low-profile crime that people graduate to the high-profile crimes. And I am hopeful. Personally, I am hopeful that the new chairman and the new leadership will do well. And I am also hopeful that the mandate of the EFCC could work for this country if we do the right thing. But I am still very skeptical about, the role of our judicial system. This long delay. We have always said, my brother Kingsley was talking about cliches. We've always heard that justice delayed is justice denied. But in this country, I wonder how much of the justice that is not delayed. And when there are cases that EFCC has been prosecuting for the past 8, 9, 10 years that I know of. And for 10 years, you are prosecuting a person and he has not been convicted. So some people even die in the process, and they just go free.
The case dies a natural death.
Their estate is inherited by people. So at least we have not done anything to stem corruption, if there is going to be a benefit in it.
Indeed, Sajo, you've raised some pertinent questions. Let me bring in Mazi Afam Osigwe, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, into this conversation. They said there's a need for a review, a rebranding of the EFCC, but it must start from within, from inside the EFCC itself, because some people have said that some workers, some staff owe allegiance to those that have gone and might sort of jeopardize the work of the new person that has come in. So there must be within a cleansing, a rejigging, and also a rebranding of the agency itself. one question I need to ask is, why is it that corruption in Nigeria keeps fighting back every time, all the time? And you look at other countries where their corruption agencies work well. Look at the Asian countries, where if you're accused of corruption, the penalty is quite heavy. Do we need to have heavy penalties? I'm not talking of death penalty here. Do we need a heavy penalty for corrupt people in Nigeria so that we can send a message to others that are attempting or would want to indulge in corruption and stealing Nigeria, which they call money from Nigeria, which they call the national cake? Everybody wants a piece of it.
Very interesting question. It's not the magnitude of punishment that matters, but the fact that those who deserve to be punished are punished. Let me quickly address a suggestion by Mr. Hajo that he suggested that cases last for 8 years and nobody is convicted. A trial mustn't necessarily end in conviction. It will only end in conviction if facts are placed before the courts which show that the defendant, as we call them now, or accused person, deserves to be convicted. And I'll get back to the question you asked. A system must be so structured to ensure that guilty persons do not go away unpunished and innocent persons do not get punished for what they've not done. It's somewhere in between. And when we also suggest that because a new leadership has come, there were some persons that must leave that system for the person to succeed, would then be personalizing it, or those who may not be my friends who worked in the last administration should not be a part of the system. That may also miss the picture, because you may lead to witch hunting, or the new helmsman trying to people the organization with its own persons. And you may therefore unwittingly either introduce a tribalism, which will enthrone incompetence, because more often than not, such appointments will not be merit-driven. People will not be placed in the rightful positions. It still brings me back to that earlier conversation that's posed by Mr. Kingsley, whether a tree makes a forest. A tree may be too small to make a forest, but it may determine the trajectory of a forest. Many countries are where they are today because they have leaders who had vision, who had focus, who had an idea where they want to take the country. So you had a Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore taking it from a third world country to a first world country. It was the force of his personality. Likewise, the Al Maktoums in Dubai, moving Dubai, which was an XY desert country, peopled by nomadic people and agrarian communities, into a first world country today that is a tourist destination, is an investment destination. What do we expect of the EFCC? And what do the chairmen, successive chairmen, see as their mandate? And to what extent does political interference prevent them from achieving their vision? They come with a lot of fire in their stomach. But you would see that there are forces pulling, making it difficult for them, stopping them from investigating certain persons. So you start investigating, you're summoned before one committee or the other, you're made to stop this investigation, a prosecution is withdrawn. So many funny things go on that hamper their ability. And at the end of the day, it is not the statistic that EFCC may reel out about the number of convictions they may have achieved in a year, but the public perception as to whether they are doing what they're supposed to do, that at the end of the day counts. I've never deceived myself that high-profile crimes are invariably much more important than the ones people call low-profile crimes. Indeed, I was asked a question by a journalist a few days ago, and he said, why is it that EFCC is going after Yahoo boys and not after politicians? And I said, he should go after every person. But if you insinuate that these are Yahoo boys, which means you admit that they may be committing a crime, but you suggest that they should be left alone so that we'll go after the big ones, then you may well bring down the economic system of the country, because a number of these internet fraudsters are wrecking banks. They are wrecking individuals and organizations and ministries. They are denting the image of the country internationally, even much more than some of so-called high-profile politicians are doing. While the politicians are dealing with our commonwealth, these people are committing invisible crimes that may portray all of us as criminals when we go outside the shores of this country. So they are as important as the high-profile crimes. But what is the modus operandi? How do we go about them? Is it by profiling young men because they wear slides and they have dreadlocks? Then you must open their phone. What is the systemic way of doing it such that you do what you should do without violating people's rights? You achieve results and do not portray as victims people who are not victims. So how do we institutionalize this fight? Depersonalize it, be dispassionate about it, so that we do what we're supposed to do. We do it by the books, so that the process, the investigation will stand up in court. So by the time you take people to court, they would either have no option than to plead guilty or to go into a plea bargain or some other agreement that saves the time and will stop making so much noise about them and get the real job done.
Okay, Leonard Senior Advocate, I will remember now if you were part of the conversation we had on Good Morning Nigeria some years ago, and I had raised this question. I want to raise it again based on what Ahmed Sajo said. That is talking about, let's say, high visible crimes and lesser or smaller crimes of economic nature or otherwise. That will take advantage of your practice. Is it necessarily the case now that 36 states that have their respective DPPs and attorneys general have literally now left off those crimes in their various statute books to EFCC? So if a crime of a financial nature is alleged to have been committed by, say, a civil servant, must you wait for the EFCC to come and prosecute that matter before you know that you are on top of it? What is the remit of the AGs, considering the enormous powers that they have? In other words, how complementary are the state attorneys general to the fight against corruption by the number of anti-corruption agencies? Our focus today is on the EFCC. We know that there's also ICPC, Code of Conduct Bureau, and so on and so forth. But what is it that the 36 state attorneys general are also doing?
That's to me.
That's to you, please.
So
yes.
The attorneys general prosecutes. They don't investigate. And our own law enforcement setup is such that the office of the attorney general is not in any way involved in the investigation. So they get files. And sometimes the law enforcement agencies are somewhat reluctant in releasing files in many areas. So they can only prosecute where there's a proper investigation. So the question then gets asked, in the absence of the EFCC, which other organizations are empowered to do so, and how equipped are they to investigate them?
Police.
At the state, it would be the police. To what extent too are they willing to investigate this crime? And not, yes, complainant, okay, you have to fund the investigation. Oh, the person complained against, don't mind these people. To what extent are they willing to investigate? To what extent do they do a thorough job? To what extent do they not set up their investigation to self-destruct such that the case will not stand up in court? To what extent do they fail to follow other leads that will provide credible evidence? And why do they write legal opinion in ministries or in the office of the DPP? Is to be sure whether they have enough facts. And sometimes matters are referred back for investigation and not a good job is being done. Things that should be followed up are not. But I understand you. The states should also show a willingness to fight crime, which at the moment appears to be lacking. So we need to do a rejig. We need to put people there who see this as one of the priorities that they have to tackle. And law enforcement agencies should be so structured as to work with the offices of Attorney General of states so as to achieve the result. Everybody has to contribute to it. All hands have to be on deck. But the system has to be structured such as to be result-oriented. Investigations have to be carried out properly. And the Attorney General must be appointed with a mindset of getting that job done. EFCC can't do everything, can't be everywhere at the same time.
Indeed. This conversation is bringing out a lot of issues that I believe the new FCC chairman, if he's watching this program, will be taking away some vital information.
He had been a guest on Good Morning Nigeria
Before,
in the past.
yes,
when he was secretary of the commission.
Yes, he has been.
Under Ibrahim Mago as acting chairman.
Exactly. And let's bring in Reverend Ugolo in Benin now. There have been calls actually from quarters in Nigeria that there should be a review of the mandate of the EFCC to give it a certain level of independence and without interference from government. And do you think there's a possibility that can happen and the government will not interfere in the runnings of the EFCC and how prosecutions take place?
I think first again, just to say that is something that most people think that will be the solution to the problem of interference. One thing that we study as a student of corruption and governance is that issue of political will defines the success of any anti-corruption agency. Just like Andy mentioned Singapore, the success of anti-corruption fight in Singapore was largely as a result of the leadership, Sikono, because he actually provided that leadership that helped the anti-corruption agency to deliver because they were reporting to his office. And if you look at our own context here in Nigeria, you will see that the political interference EFCC also defines how the EFCC leadership will be successful. And if you look, the previous case that led to the suspension of Bauer was as a result of altercation between Bauer and some political elite within the ruling party, and that led to his fall. So, and if you look the history of all previous political leadership, all the leadership in EFCC, right from the time of Ribadu, all the previous ones, it will give you an insight how political interference actually affects the anti-corruption fight. So, in defining the way forward for the new EFCC chairman, it will be very good for us to put it in perspective that his success will largely depend on how President Tinubu wants to be remembered for. Why I said President Tinubu is that the presidency do have a large role to play, because at the end of the day, if the EFCC chairman is to deliver, it depends on how the current leadership of the country, and that's where we call the political will of the current leadership of the country. Whether EFCC will perform, it depends on that will. And that will can be defined in a number of ways. If a prominent political elite from APC, the EFCC embarks on, like they are focusing on procurement corruption, all the major contracts in the country, it is not the poor that gets those contracts. All the high-profile corruption cases in the country is the political elite. And this political elite are in PDP, they are in APC, they are in Labour Party. They are spread across the country, including traditional rulers, including religious leaders. So, if EFCC decides to take it up to investigate and prosecute, will the court be able to provide that support? It is only in this country we have seen indefinite restriction, restraining EFCC for not investigating. And when you do analysis of that case, the wife of that former governor was in the Supreme Court. So what we have in Nigeria today is a complex corruption issue where we call state capture. When you have a state capture, when this minority elite, 1%, it has nothing to do with tribe. They are from the north, they are from the south. So when people make references to whether the person that is the head of EFCC is from the north or south, it doesn't matter. The people that are ruining this country, that are involved in corruption, they are friends, they are brothers, they are sisters. Religion has nothing to separate them. If EFCC is going to deliver, it depends on the political will of the leadership of the country. Then I bring it to the other way around. The masses of this country, the citizens of this country, the media of this country, they have to now agree that corruption is affecting everybody. And if corruption is affecting everybody, what would be the best possible way to move out of it? Because that's exactly what one of the panelists have also make reference to. You cannot depend on the system that is benefiting from the system to provide solution. Because the appointment process, EFCC cannot take somebody and prosecute the person without the cooperation of the court. But the court is dominated by the appointee of this elite. And it's really difficult. That is why we are also looking for a means where there will be less challenge. So let's see how we can use plea bargain. Let's see how people can own up and say, I've committed a crime. And then there is a plea bargain system. We can get some part of this money because it takes time. The only people that can be prosecuted in this country are people with bicycle. Once you have $1 billion or millions in your account, it is increasingly difficult for EFCC to prosecute because this.
The Reverend Ugolo, thank you very much for the points that you have made. But just to indicate, I'm sure that a number of knowledgeable Nigerians are familiar with one of the cases you mentioned, where a former governor secured a perpetual injunction against the EFCC from investigating him and so on and so forth. And you were insinuating that the spouse probably, who was on the bench, probably might have had a role. We don't have that information, and we have to be clear about that. We are not aware of any attempt at collusion or connivance or obstruction of justice. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. If the EFCC had that judgment against it, it also had a right of appeal. They did exercise the right of appeal at the time it ought to have exercised that right. We'll take a short break now.
I promise that I shall remain committed and serve faithfully. I also invite all to join this enterprise to make our beloved nation into its better self. We can do it. We must do it. We shall do it.
It's Good Morning Nigeria, still on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As you must have heard from various reports, today the Supreme Court will begin hearing the respective appeals filed by the presidential candidates and their parties against the judgment of the Presidential Election Petition Court, which was the Court of Appeal, as court of first instance in the outcome of the February 25th, 2023 presidential election. Our legal correspondent, Dele Atumbi, who also covered the presidential election petition court judgment that lasted over 12 and a half hours, is right there at the Supreme Court here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Dele, give us a situational report. What is the ambience like ahead of the hearing today?
Thank you, Kingsley. As at the time I'm talking to you, all is now set for the Supreme Court to adjudicate over the appeals from the decision of the Presidential Election Petition Court, which gave its verdict on 3 consolidated petitions on the 6th of September 2023. You will equally recall that on the 6th of September 2023, the Presidential Election Petition Court dismissed all the petitions, the 3 petitions, on the basis of the fact that they lacked merit. It was as a result of that that the appellants have now come before the Supreme Court. And one of the things we must note is this, that since some of the things that will be in the appeal will be about constitutional matters, definitely, according to the rule of the Supreme Court, the justices will be 7 to be able to adjudicate over the matter because constitutional matters will be raised. Who are the appellants in this matter? We have Atiku Abubakar and the PDP. We have Peter Obi and Labour Party. We equally have APM. And the respondents are INEC, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and the All Progressive Congress. One of the things that we should know about this matter is that the presidential election, the presidential candidate of the PDP had equally sought the leave of the court for him to produce additional evidence. Whether the court will accept it or not, it is at the discretion of the court. But I am aware that the 7-man panel had been empaneled by Justice Olukayode Ariwola, and the panel is set to hear the 3 consolidated appeal matter.
Dele, while we are still with you, Dele, if you can hear me, briefly, very briefly, address the talk from the street about what, in a layman's opinion, appears to them to be a looming constitutional crisis, because it is said that one of the justices of the Supreme Court will be turning 70 in a couple of days, and therefore will be buying out, which will further reduce the number of justices available at the Supreme Court. But I know that you have already said that the 7-man panel had earlier been empaneled. So if that was the case, why should we continue to have this talk from the street, as it were? You're a lawyer as well, Dele.
Well, thank you, Kisley. The truth of the matter is that Justice Olukayode Ariwola, as the Chief Justice of Nigeria, is aware of the fact that any justice that is leaving us, that is buying out, cannot be empaneled to sit over this matter. And I am aware that Justice Musa Datijo will be buying out of the courts of the Supreme Court by Friday. So he's not part of the panel. That one I can tell you for free, is not part of the panel at all. So it is just speculative, and something that that cannot be relied on. But there was a statement issued by the Supreme Court that Justice Musa Datijo will be retiring on Friday.
Dele Atunbi, thank you very much. Well, we can't get into the details now, and I'm sure when the time comes, NTA would have its usual special coverage. But very briefly, again, I'm extending this, very briefly, what might have happened? What might have happened? This will be for the benefits of those who are talking from the street. That's to say, the layman's perspective. Assuming the Lordship, who is retiring later this week, were to be among the panel today, and then he retires in a matter of days, what might have happened?
The truth of the matter is that he will be replaced, and I am aware that he has not been part of the panel. As at the time I'm talking to you, we still have, if he retires on Friday, we'll still have 10 justices in the Supreme Court, though they should be 21 in accordance with the constitutional provision.
Dele, thank you very much. Our viewers and us here in the studios will be watching out for your incisive reports, and I'm sure the learned senior advocate who is here with us in the studios will also agree. Some persons assume erroneously that if the Chief Justice empanels a set of judges of his brothers to hear an appeal, that he necessarily must be the chair. That isn't necessarily the case. All right, Dele Atunbi, our legal correspondent, at the grounds of the Supreme Court, as the hearing of the appeal filed by the various parties and candidates in the last presidential election against the outcome of the decision of the Presidential Election Court. The hearing of the appeal commences today. Dele Atumbi, thank you very much for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Kingsley.
All right, so back to the studios. There's an issue that I want to draw attention to. It's a bit provocative, the way I want to state it. We're talking about media trial. My question is going to Ahmad Sajo. We, of course, are dead against media trial. The learned senior advocate has spoken about it, and we know what it is like. You drag a person through the mud, you don't give him the right to defend himself before a properly constituted court. But is it possible that somehow our own, if you like, cultural nuances, communication nuances, also foster this media trial? We've talked about quiet, silent, diligent investigation before you then come up to the target, pick him up, and then get the person to court. But when you are proceeding with your silent, quiet, diligent investigation, you are not out there in the open. Are we, as a people, this is where the cultural communication comes in, are we patient enough? Are Nigerians not the same to say EFCC? We don't know what they are doing, though. Nothing is happening with that place. Everywhere is just quiet. Yes. Nothing is happening. So when you hear this kind of street comment, is it not possible that you put pressure on the EFCC to show that they are working?
I think that does not justify media trials. And let me tell you, the dangers of the media trials we do, the public space trials that we do, are that, they open up opportunities for those to be tried to block avenues for proper investigation. Because sometimes in trying to do the media trials, they mention all manner of facts that should have been investigated. They disclose all the leads that should be followed for investigation. And in the process, they kill the possibility of discreet investigation. I think I still stand by the fact that the trial stage, whether it is in the public space or in the district, should be determined by when somebody is arraigned before a competent court of law. And I will tell you where that all these media trials and mudslinging and the rest, where it leads us to. It leads to vendetta. When the person when his reputation has been impugned substantially by the media trials, and because our system does not preclude such a person from holding position of trust in spite of the media trials, when he gets to that position of trust, the next thing he wants to do is to go after the people that, instituted that media trial. So for me, we should do a little of the media trials. But most importantly, another thing that we need to address very urgently is security of tenure of people that head anti-corruption agencies. If you do not secure their tenure, let's look at it this way. EFCC, the first EFCC chairperson, Nuhu Ribadu, who came, there was no EFCC, he set the tone. We're expecting that after Nuhu Ribadu, we would begin to build on some of the things he did. The next person that took over from him immediately was Ibrahim Lamorde. Ibrahim Lamorde was in acting capacity, was for all intent an insider because he was director of operations under Ribadu. But he left under very unceremonial circumstances. He was even pushed to a place called Ningi somewhere in Bauchi as a punishment for what he did after Nuhu himself was, pursued even up to outside this country. Then after that, Farida Waziri was the only outsider that came again, that was not part of the EFCC. But when she left, also under very controversial circumstances, they brought back Ibrahim Lamorde. Ibrahim Lamorde was an insider, and after him we had Magu, who was also an insider, and now we are having
Magu was never confirmed as chair.
He was never, but in acting capacity, but he was also an insider, because I knew when Magu was an operative. I met him when he came to Adamawa on an investigation as an EFCC person, so I know he was an insider. After Magu, You know, Bauer is the first among the crop of EFCC employed staff that were trained for the EFCC. He became chairman. And now we have Olukaide, who was a chief of staff to Farida Waziri and later, you know, secretary of the commission under Magu. So most of them are insiders. They understand the operations. But they also, it also comes with this, you know, divisions that we're talking about. We know, I know this guy's roles and this guy's roles. So what we need to do is to say, look, an EFCC chairman and an EFCC operative must have some level of security of tenure, protection from persecution, from people who may feel aggrieved, not necessarily by their conviction, because when somebody is convicted and you see the report of his conviction, the shame alone should put him on check. But the person that you go and destroy in the media, his reputation is destroyed, and then he's not convicted, and he goes out in the street and assumes a position of authority, he will definitely come for a payback. I think we need to do something about that.
Yes, yes, that's it. Mazi Afam Ozigwe, you know, at times it's when the program is ending that it becomes very, very interesting. Now, there have been calls that there's one significant avenue for the EFCC to really function well is the use of technology. We've seen in developed countries where they use technology to you know, to get information, to be able to prosecute those that are committing corruption in the country. Do you think that we have the capacity in this country for the use of technology to access, to tap into people's maybe telephone, to be able to listen to their... Is it right to use that kind of technology?
Of course.
Okay.
EFCC has access to them.
Okay.
And I know that in working with the Office of the National Security Advisor, such facilities are available. It's just to draw a fine line between putting it to proper use and then not abusing it to violate people's privacy, which is why in the Western world or in some other organized societies, the use of such technology cannot be deployed without an order of court authorizing it. And I know that the EFCC has adequate access to and use of technology. They have forensic departments, they're able to analyze emails, phones, computers, and all that. But the question is, to what extent do they really put it to use to investigate crimes, other than bringing in people to ask questions, to write statements? So that is what should count. A whole lot of investment has been made in technology to aid their investigative abilities.
Gather evidence.
To gather evidence, and also to use in trials. But to the extent to which they deploy them, I may not be able to say. But yes, they are sufficiently equipped to use them, and they indeed use them. The scope I may never be able to talk about, but I know they use them.
Good.
All right, Senior Advocate Afam Osigwe, thank you very much for your views. The Reverend David Ugolo, let's return to you in our Benin Network studios. And for the remainder of the time that we have, very quickly, let's talk about recoveries and utilization of recoveries. There seems to be lack of clarity as to what happens. Yes, you see the house, you see the usual markings, EFCC, keep off, EFCC, keep off. So what could better be done in terms of recoveries and utilization of those recoveries under the ambit of the EFCC?
This question is very germane, so that all the resources and energy invested in trying to tackle the challenge of corruption, whether it's grand corruption or petty corruption, can also be beneficial for the country. Like I said, in a climate where you have a situation where crime is very high, you can also turn it to become profitable for the government. So the issue of asset recovery, and we are happy, and that's one key thing that's now available for the country, the Proceeds of Crime Act. The Proceeds of Crime Act provides that architectural framework of dealing with the challenge of asset recovery and management. And even within the Federal Ministry of Justice, you have the Asset Recovery and Management Unit. And because of this law now, all the anti-corruption agencies now have a unit dedicated for asset recovery and management, because that is the new law in the country. prior before now, it was a big challenge until when Buhari created the Interministerial Committee on Asset Recovery Disposal, which I was a member. And that was going to provide an enabling environment for those assets that were seized by the anti-corruption agencies to be disposed of. But if you look what has happened across the country, we've gone to the sea, where all ships were seized and all. The amount of wastage in asset recovery from crime is unacceptable. And if you were to make a sales of those assets, it can become a genuine source of revenue for the country. So in the way forward, in terms of reform, is to encourage the anti-corruption agency and the new EFCC chairman to strengthen the asset recovery and management unit within EFCC and try to put professionals, because you need some level of professionality to be able to manage assets that is recovered. And in the management of assets, there are best practice, even though Nigeria, you can also refer to Nigeria as one country that have done very well. Since the recovering of all the looted assets, particularly the Abuja asset, from Abuja 1 to Abuja 2. The Abuja 2, over $325.5 million that was recovered, was used to fund cash transfer across the country. Over 2 million Nigerians benefited from it. And once Nigerians begin to see the benefit of fighting corruption, so when you make a sales of the assets seized from these people, either the buildings or the properties or the liquid cash, and you put it in the budget and you translate it to a concrete road constructions, building of hospitals, people will begin to support EFCC. And EFCC will begin to see political support from the people. And I think this is the right way in going. Not just EFCC alone, other anti-corruption agencies should take an advantage of the Proceeds of Crime Act to establish a professional unit that will be dealing with management of assets. And that way, we'll be putting professionality into it. And there are guidelines. Even if you look at Chapter 5 of the UNCAC, which is the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which Nigeria also signed on to. That treaty in Chapter 5, it deals with the whole issue of asset recovery and management.
Okay. Thank you so much, Reverend David Ugolo, Executive Director, Anich, for your contribution and insight into this conversation. I'm sure that all eyes are on the new EFCC chairman and all eyes are on the EFCC to see how it can transit to an EFCC that every Nigerian will be proud of. Thank you so much for your contribution. Mazi Afam Osigwe, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, former NBA Secretary General, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I'm Mesajo, former Commissioner for Information and Strategy, Adamawa State and Public Affairs Analyst. As always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. My pleasure always.
So that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. Thank you for being with us. Tomorrow is another day. Usual time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Jumma Yusuf. Thanks for joining us.